Well, welcome parents. Thank you so much to both Stephanie Welch and to Eran Levy for joining us today. This is really our first time that we've had an interview with some parents of students of our program. So we appreciate you kind of just speaking candidly about how your child and even how maybe you've come to get to know us. So let's open up with that. We'll start with Stephanie. How did you come to get involved with the work that both Kevin and I are doing? Both Kevin and me are doing. That's correct.
Good morning. Thank you guys for having me. We have been blessed to know both of you. My son Owen attended a camp, I believe it was a physics camp back when he was the summer of 7th grade and then also summer of 8th grade, at which point we were able to find that he had a real passion for physics and for science and aerospace. And basically with Kevin's help, we're able to kind of nurture that and get him more involved. He then with Shauna's help, getting him able to speak, which obviously I can't do, but teaching him how to speak well in public. He was able to take his science background and speak in front of Humans to Mars. He has done numerous things with aerospace. He has attended and led the space settlement competition, which we were in China. That was such an amazing experience. Owen is fairly reserved, so I don't get to see a whole lot of what he does, but I was able to attend that conference with him, and it was amazing just to see the excitement and the love that he has for aerospace and that he's been able to grow and just do so much thanks to the two of you.
And Mr. Levy, how did you come to get involved?
Thank you. So what happened is pretty similar where my son Daniel, he attended the gifted school where your program was part of it, and slowly started to get exposed to what I call the flagship project, which was sending stuff to space. And I saw how inspired he was at that time. So what I saw is a pretty similar story to what Stephanie just shared. Someone who is very much into science and technology, but also with your help, Shauna, starting to develop not only the passion for science, but also the ability to communicate effectively about what he's doing, what he did, or convince people to do something. And to me, this is fantastic skill, right? And it doesn't come so easy. So I was watching him for early grades as he was joining that program. One of the younger kids, more kind of observing the older ones like Owen and others, and seeing how they do great things and learning from them in groups. Which is also a pretty interesting way of inspiring the kids. And nowadays, I see him, researching, writing papers, writing code that goes to space. He's very excited about this. And all this with the help of the two of you here, really making him achieving things that he didn't believe that it's even possible. It's a possibility. Now, recently we went together to Hawaii, to that conference. And he also presented not only in Hawaii, also in San Diego, the AIA conference. And observing him, seeing as a parent, watching him writing stuff and then standing there and delivering and presenting and talking, competing with adults, competing with university students, right? As equals, to me, that was very, very interesting.
I think even for me, I realize that as adults, we tend to stop doing those things which help us to stand out. We just become stuck kind of in our groove of what our job is, the daily expectations. But for me, having been part of this program and having such amazing kids to work with, it's allowed me to step beyond even my comfort zone and force me to be even better at what I do by actually doing the presentations and by working through the papers or writing papers myself. So when you think about these skills overall as parents and as in your fields, what do you think these kids might not recognize that they're gaining that will actually help them in all aspects of their life? So we'll start with Eran this time first.
Thank you, Shauna. So I didn't introduce myself, but I work for Cisco. That's one of the big tech companies. So I get to observe that what our industry looks like every day. And what I see is a kind of disconnect. And I'm not an educator, right? I'm just a parent here speaking. I see a disconnect between what schools typically do and what we do every day, right? And not just our firm, everybody's pretty much the same. And to your point, what I see is a strong need to work in groups, small groups, and be accountable for success of a group. That's not a typical school thing. I see projects. I see creative thinking, not bringing knowledge, but bringing creative problem solving, bringing thinking process that's outside the box of trying to figure out new things that never done before. That's what I see every day. So I do see the gap between what typically you learn in school and what you're required to do every day in your adult life, right? And to me, that's why I like so much this program, because if you think about it, all these things are actually happening there, from thinking creatively, solving problems that were not solved before, thinking about what's next, what else is possible that we don't know yet about, right? Experimenting in space, and then slowly teaching them how to take a professional approach, experimenting, bringing their friends, bringing all the brain power together. That's very important. You don't do it in school. And then all this felt capital, create something new, exciting, unique, build it, the engineering skill, send it to space in that case, right? And then afterwards go and explain and talk and spread your ideas. So back to your question, what I see is exactly building these critical skills that make them successful in tomorrow's economy, if you will. I see how this is happening step by step.
Stephanie.
Yeah, I agree with Eran 100%. I mean, they definitely do lack these skills in our traditional school system, and this is going to benefit them so much. But I really love Kevin's, and Kevin, you'll have to correct me because I'm not going to get this exactly right, but your, I want to say quote of, if you don't tell a kid what they can't do, they'll never know they can't do it. So one of the biggest things, and I, again, probably said that a little bit wrong, but the biggest thing that I think these kids are getting that they don't realize is that they're doing things that so many kids don't do because people put them in boxes and they put limits on them and they say, oh, kids can't do this and kids can't send satellites to space and you can't have a middle schooler talking at Humans to Mars or speaking at the International Aeronautical Congress. These things that are absolutely amazing, but because they have no boundaries, they're asked to do it and they rise to the occasion, and their possibilities are limitless. And to see what they have done at such young age, it's kind of hard to imagine where they're going to go from there.
Right. Well, you really teed that one up for me. That's the blue sky learning, right? And it's we don't really put limitations. Really, it's an extension of something in education we call the growth mindset. And that quote actually is, if kids don't know why they should not be able to go to space, right? So let's just do that. And Eran, I just want to refer back to something you said. I think the things you mentioned about collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, all of that, those are 21st century skills, but it's really no different than entrepreneurship, right? So I feel like there's elements of entrepreneurship we should be instilling in these young kids very young.
Right. And I add one more thing, right? When you look at what industry needs or what these, future scientists should look like and how we prepare them, you see a kind of, again, a disconnect. It's almost like, this example I like to think about, it's almost like when I sit where I sit now and I see new people coming to the workforce, right? I see that their background is very conceptual. It's like trying to make good bike riders by teaching bike theory. And what you do, Kevin and Shauna, is actually show them and teach them how to ride a bike. So when they bring all these skills, they already know, they got it. It's not theoretical anymore.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I think it's been interesting too, because having been a teacher and a parent, right, from a child who participated late, but like got involved, what I've come to be most impressed with really, and I give most of this to Kevin. I came along and I can help people talk about it. That's great, but he's able to find niches that help students who might not think, when they first hear aerospace, just like me, I was like, astronaut, right? Like that's it. I had no idea the number of jobs and that there basically is a place for every kid in an industry, whatever that industry is. It's so large and encompassing that you can take your passion and apply it to something else. I think we teach that wrong in school. I think kids usually come out of our educational system thinking, oh, I'm only going to be this thing and this is the one path for how I'm going to make that happen. And yet, if we could approach it from this larger perspective, the idea that industry has a place for everyone, pick an industry and then find your niche. So for me, even I've realized that, I'm an English teacher. Well, guess what? I am now a STEM teacher. So there's no limit to where you can go with these. I think that's a skill that they'll be able to take. That's this idea of being adaptable.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about some unique experiences that each of your kids had. Now, Ms. Stephanie, you alluded to Beijing, China.
Yes.
That the name of that competition, it was the Future Space Scholars Meet.
That's it, yeah.
And it was pre-COVID, and prior to COVID, the idea was China has two sort of a bifurcated space program. One half is military, but there's another half that's sort of the peaceful use of space. So it was those folks in China, a group called the Space Foundation in the US, and a UK space group decided they would have a competition that alternated between the three countries. And we were the US representative in Beijing. And could you maybe share a little bit about what you saw happen to Owen there? I have a lot of great stories, but I would rather hear your story, maybe about Owen, what happened, and what you think he got out of that.
He wants you to talk about how on the eve of the democracy or of China's.
Actually, I could tell
the election.
all day long.
The
but
election.
I would rather hear your memories of that.
Sure, absolutely. So it was an amazing experience all the way around. The kids, so during all of the experiences that they have, the travel experiences, they work. They are busy working all the time. They're planning, they're researching, they're putting things together. So they're very busy. So I didn't get to see a whole lot of the behind the scenes because they were busy working. I know that they had at one point a 24-hour, is it called a hackathon, where they're up for 24 hours planning and arranging. But at one point they did, at the beginning, they were in different groups and they had to elect, I believe, a president, a few different roles that they had to. And so kids, I believe, opted to run for certain roles. And my son, being who he is, decided to run for president. And I believe he ran. So the groups that they were in a group comprised of not just US students, but also students from China. And I believe, I'm not exactly sure. I want to say
there was
Indonesia or something.
A girls team from Pakistan.
Pakistan, that's right. And so there were multinational kids in these groups. They were from everywhere. So and they didn't all speak the same language. So there was a language barrier, and they had to figure out how to get across that they would be the best leaders. So Owen had to do this. And it was difficult because he was in a group with, I believe, a large portion of Chinese students. So
they were all Chinese. They were
it was just our group.
10 Americans and probably about 50 Chinese kids.
So that's a very difficult, start. You're going to have a very difficult chance to actually win the presidency for your group, the leadership role. But from what I understand, he did very well. He came very close to winning. However, he did not win, but it was good for him because he needed it's good to be a little humbled and to sit back and realize that, maybe he could have done a couple of things differently, and then also to sit back and take a secondary role and have to be part of the group and not necessarily lead, because he is used to being more of a leader. So that was a good experience for him. It was definitely interesting.
Yes, yes. It was for our listeners, it was a design competition, 24-hour hackathon, and the kids had never met one another, and there were a lot of real world group dynamic issues, right?
Absolutely.
About who's in charge, who gets to make the final call. Imagine all the difficulties in a multinational team, except with 15 and 12 to 15-year-old. And but it was such a wonderful experience from a learning standpoint.
Well, I think you think about the future of business, and I think even the economy overall, it has to be collaborative internationally. Even space of the future, the settlements are going to be internationally collaborative. It was a microcosm of exactly what they're going to have to do in the future to be able to negotiate and to recognize, guess what, America, not always going to be on top. You're going to have to figure out how to play with the bigger teams.
So and to put a button on that trip afterwards, we were discussing the potential. They wanted us to be a part of a satellite, and I said, look, the U.S. law is such that, ITAR says that U.S. and China do not play together space-wise, right? That is like verboten. So, but we were discussing ways where if it was a Chinese spacecraft on a Chinese vehicle and we didn't contribute any technology, we were working on that before COVID. So it's a little bit of a hope for what the future could be if we're able to collaborate.
If kids can do it, then certainly we as adults can get there eventually, or there'll be those adults who do get there.
Right.
And they had bumps along the way for sure, but it was a great experience.
Yeah, it's yes.
Even the Hawaii trip, right? So like even there, I know it's one of the states, but it's not. Like it's not. It's so far away, and like the terrain and everything. Just in general, it was as though you get the experience of kids from different locations. And so what I really want, I think back about Daniel and those kids who went there, right? They're so young. This is Daniel's first experience since he was there, right? First experience, not only speaking publicly at that kind of an international level, but to have to travel in order to do so. So as dad watching your son for the first time out there, what do you think he perhaps took away the most from not only, being able to switch it up from being like at a poster and being able to communicate, not just like a straight speech, but to converse?
Right. A lot of things. So first of all, it was to me, and I think a lot of the adults around, was pretty surprising seeing kids at this age doing what they do. I can tell you, for Daniel and the group of friends that he was leading there, that was not they took it naturally. And you saw they were just standing there, and I observed him. They were standing there, they're doing the networking the way they were taught to do, talking to adults, explaining what they do, speaking very naturally with all these kind of surprised faces, and just explain, here's what you do, here's our experiments, that's what we believe the future of AI looks like, whatever the topic was, right? For education specifically. So he learned a lot. He learned all these skills that I know you guys worked a lot on it during the program, but you're right, it was the first time going to international conference and just doing it, dressing up properly, and just standing there, shaking hands, explaining, well, limited shaking hands, that's still COVID, but everything else was there. So I was obviously very proud, but also, and I think you saw there are all kind of moments of stress, moment of, uncertainties. And we all go through these. I did it at much older age. I'm very glad that he gets to do these kind of things early and frequently.
I think that's both the blessing and the curse of it, right? And I think Stephanie could kind of testify to that too. It's like when Owen went off to high school, he didn't have those same the exposure to those experiences that kind of helped him to stay separated. And that was really why we wanted to create something that would allow kids, once they left a particular location of a school, to be able to come back and dabble and still be able to expand.
And let's talk about, I think there's a real benefit in letting the kids not only do these things, but they have to mess up a little, right? You only really learn when you mess up and you assess and do a little reflection and you go, well, I can do it better. That's the beautiful thing about being, let's say, in an exhibit hall for 3 hours, right? you start out a little rough, but by the end of the session, you are on a roll, right? Because it's repetition.
It's interesting
but
too, because they have to practice at some extent, but they don't know what to expect, right? So as you were saying, Eran, you know, they would have people coming up. It's hard to rehearse a poster. It's easier to rehearse a presentation, right? Like you can get that,
Right.
like the Von Trapp family singers down and like we're presenting, but a poster it's a little bit different. So when he's been able to, and he filled in for somebody as well, like
That's
he even
right.
spoke on somebody's topic that wasn't his, which is a testament to him being so willing.
And I want to share now, we got back, I think it was about January 10th or so, we got back, and from January 10th to about February 10th, a group of 23 students have written, and we've submitted 42 abstracts to 5 conferences. And I think Daniel is on at least 5 of them. He is working on at least 2 or 3 of the competitions we have going on now, and he's on at least, I want to say, 4 or 5 papers.
Crazy.
And I think that's, you know, when you have it, it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know, do a little work, go on a trip, get really inspired, do more work, go on more trips. I think that's the drug that we're pushing.
Was Owen recently also presenting for the big Amazon web presentation?
Yes,
So
yes.
even though he is now graduating,
Yeah.
the beauty of it is that we can call upon him to kind of come back, and he's such a powerhouse. We know we're right where we can use him. He's like the top of anything presenting. So.
I had 3 young kids and 2 high school kids at frankly, the most important corporate presentation we've made so far, because there was a direct ask for a bunch of money to help us broaden our reach. And in fact, your kids both were on the short list and presented at that
and it was short notice too. It wasn't like,
oh yeah, that's another thing, is be flexible and you got to do your best, right?
Well, I'll say for Owen, like he has come so far, and obviously I attribute a lot of his success to both of you, because honestly, he couldn't have done what he did without both of you. But he is now able, because of everything he's been through, to put together something very quickly. And he's spoken about so much of this so many times, that he has worked through a lot of those bugs and a lot of that which I have trouble with, tripping over your own words, all of that stuff. He has gotten through all of that, and he probably still does a little bit of it, but that confidence level is just so great to see.
So with a high school kid, Owen, he rolled into a practice. He wasn't good. It was not polished. He hadn't done it in a while. And I said, okay, dude, just write out your write out your notes and send it to me. He sent me his notes. He had greatly improved it from that one little practice we had. And then he just rolled into it. Now we can't do that with a middle school student, right? We have to practice more, but you're right. Once Owen is a confident speaker and he knows how to prepare. I believe when we went to Washington, DC, I made him sit next to me on the plane, and we worked on his presentation the entire flight from Florida to Washington, DC.
That's fantastic. I know. So I just recently finished school for the second time, and having gone through this time, I have to do a lot of presenting. That's part of, what I had to do to get my second degree. And that was hard for me because it's not something that I was comfortable with. So just like you, Shauna, having to step outside of my comfort zone. But these kids have already done that. They're already there. This is one thing that they're not going to have to worry about. And they're going to be more well-rounded because of it.
Right.
well,
Yes, and just to add on top of that, you mentioned all these papers that the team submitted recently. So I was kind of observing, watching what they do, and it's pretty amazing, not just for this age, even for our age, to see a group orchestrating it, working, taking turns in leadership, right? Sometimes you have to lead your friends at the middle school age. That's not a simple task, but I see how they navigate it pretty well. They learn how to do it. I was pretty impressed. I know it sounds it's not simple. Even for those, it's not simple.
No, it's not.
It's college level writing. And that's like a lot of times the kids think they're going to send something and that's it, we're done. And they get frustrated with me because I kick it back so many times. Once that abstract is done, that's one thing. Then the paper writing, right? So it's
right.
And the kids have to learn, it's one thing to be a leader, but you also have to learn how to be a good follower, right? So if you all, you know, if you mix up who are the leaders, I'll give you a really quick story. This week, a team leader comes to me and goes, I got these two kinds of kids on this big project. One group of one child is not pulling their load. They're just procrastinating. And the leader's talking to me about this. And then he goes, and another child is doing all of this work, but it's really not at the level that we need. And I said, well, you have to help elevate, you know, you got to help that both groups, right? And then I talked to the one child, and this one child goes, I have done all of this work on the project. And what I was trying to convey is volume is not necessarily quality. And what I said to her was, you got to talk to your leader, because this leader is the biggest stakeholder, right? He wants this to be the best it can be. No one wants it more than this guy. And I said, if you will simply ask him what he specifically needs, he'll tell you, because he wants it to be successful. There's, you know, you build in a little pride and loyalty, and you also have to give them room to learn how that, even if you put in a lot of time, that doesn't mean it's good.
You don't get the YMCA trophy just because.
Yeah, because we want them to play at the, you know, at the highest possible level. But it was fun talking about stakeholders, who cares about this, and trying to really ask your boss what you need from him. You know, what is the expectation? You know, that's always fun to see the kids figure that out.
So the other day he came to me, and when he was leading one of these papers, he wanted to know, how do you inspire other people? It's not exact words, but how do you inspire other people to stretch higher? In other words, he gave them that work, but he wanted everybody to achieve something bigger together. That's a tough question. There's no easy answer, but that's what the program gets them to think and wonder and try to figure out how they do that. You mentioned something interesting I want to talk about. You talk about risk and failure, right? And allow them to fail sometimes, which is obviously very important, but also learn the cost of failure, which is something that recently I saw just yesterday because of the new initiative you work on with the code that is going to go to space. And it's fun because in the past, they all failed. Daniel failed and he learned from that. But now he came and showed me the new activity and I'm figuring out, and I saw how he understands that failing something that goes to a poster, that's one thing we can go and fix. Now, if that code doesn't work and goes to space, there is no second chance. The mission is gone.
All the time.
Exactly.
Well, we are at the end of our interview, but I always like to kind of close with a similar question. And I think this one will be a little different simply because from the parent's perspective. So if we have parents listening who might be on the fence, maybe they think this is too much for their kid, or maybe they think like, you know, I don't really think my kid is interested in aerospace. What would you say to a parent who's looking to find a program to differentiate their child? So we'll start, let's close this out with Stephanie, and then we'll finish with Eran.
So just kind of pull this all back. It's amazing to think that all the stuff that we're discussing, the majority of these kids are in middle school. And that's kind of hard to wrap your brain around, that they're doing all of these things that we typically consider like adult things, the collaboration and the speaking and the presentations and the just sending satellites to space. All of these things are for adults usually, but these are middle schoolers. And I think being able to do all of these things has, for my son specifically, made him a much more confident, eloquent, understanding, overall well-rounded person because of all of the experiences that he's had. And yes, they were hard. They were challenging. I don't even want to say challenging, because most of the things were very difficult from my perspective. But again, he didn't know any different. So he just went along and did it. And now he knows that he can do those things and more. And I wouldn't hesitate for a second to put your child in these programs. I think they're only going to benefit, even through the struggles, even through the failures. Those are all very important. They're learning how to work. They're learning how to be a part of a team. It's all only going to benefit them. And they start at an early age. They're middle school.
True. And I would say, agree to everything you said, Stephanie, that I see the exact same thing and I have the same opinion. And on top of that, no no two kids are the same in the program. That's what I started to realize. They have different skill sets, strengths, passions, etc. And what I love here is that because they do so many things, and it is complex, every kid gets to find the niche, the area that to utilize their strength, but also, and equally important, and I saw this with Daniel, to take the areas that are not their passion. For example, Daniel's very strong in the programming, the engineering, and the science part. Language art was not the area that, however, if you ask a kid to go and write an essay about whatever, it doesn't matter, the second word, they'll do it. But now if they have to work on a project they're really excited about with their friends, and they have to write something about this and talk about it, then you see how they start to like everything. So it's not just developing all the skills, it's really capitalizing on the strength and finding for each kid the unique areas where they can contribute more and they like to, and let them run there, but also take all the other areas that are important and not leave them behind, help them develop them, and maybe develop some passion there. So same thing, absolutely recommend any parent to consider that. And I'm excited, Kevin and Shauna, that you're taking this program and now trying to broaden the, reaching out other schools, other areas. Now we're more virtual than ever before, thanks to what we experienced the last couple of years. But it's a good thing because now we can reach more to more kids. And I think others will have more opportunities like this. That's exciting.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. We continue to want to work with your children, regardless of whether they're off to college or off to the high school. So please stick around with us. We look forward to traveling with you guys again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.